Today we're looking at how to bake with cold butter. Recipes that typically call for cold butter are things like biscuits, scones, pie dough, anything where you're trying to create flakiness. Cold butter is the key to flakiness. So most of the time what the recipe is going to tell you is to start with diced cold butter. So you have a stick of butter, this is how you dice it. My little trick and what I like to do is I will open the butter and leave it on the wrapper that it comes in, and then use my knife to slice it into chunks one way, turn it on its little side and go the other way, and then splay it open and dice it one more way. So I'm not making teeny tiny little dices. I'm basically cutting this into 16 cubes across the stick of the butter. Then, if I have to do multiple sticks of butter, I would literally take this, stash it in my fridge or freezer while I dice the other ones, because even the heat of my hand from handling this is starting to melt this butter a little bit, and we want it to stay cold. Once your butter is diced, the recipe is probably going to tell you to add the cold diced butter to the dry ingredients which you've already mixed. This can be done in a bowl by hand. It might also tell you to do it in the food processor. That's a very common method, to put it all in the food processor, to pulse it every once in a while, or sometimes there are recipes that tell you to do this in the mixer. One of my favorite pie dough recipes uses the mixer to do this. It doesn't matter, you can do any of it by hand, but this is what you're gonna do. You take the cold butter, you put it into the dry ingredients, and then you're trying to incorporate and break up the butter just a little bit until it holds together when you squeeze it. And it's gonna seem like it's not mixed enough, and that is okay. We do not want to incorporate the butter fully, because remember, we want chunks of butter left. So that is gonna look like this. Mostly a sandy, dry texture with large chunks of cold butter just waiting to create flaky layers once they hit the oven. It seems counterintuitive. You want to mix it more, you want to get it all evenly distributed, but you've got to fight that urge. The secret to flakiness is leaving these large chunks of butter in the batter. So another trick about baking anything that calls for cold butter, because colder is better, is you can freeze the finished product and bake it frozen. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This is some scone dough that has been mixed and formed and then cut. So you can take your formed scone dough, and I like to use Ziploc baggies, but you could certainly do it on a tray. And you can put them in a Ziploc baggie next to each other. Squeeze out all the air, zip it up, and store the whole thing in your freezer until you're ready to bake these. Then when it's time to bake them, take them straight from the freezer, put them on your baking sheet, put some egg wash, sprinkle a little sugar on there, and bake them frozen. It might add a little bit of baking time, 5 to 10 minutes, but they are going to be perfect. That butter is definitely going to be cold because the whole thing has been frozen, and that is wonderful. It's another great way to make scone dough once and just bake it off as you need it. You can do this when you're having guests over. You can do this if you only have a small family and you only want to bake 2 scones at a time. You can have that scone dough waiting for you in the freezer. It's one of my favorite tips for scones. And that's everything you need to know about baking with cold butter.